The show is Stand to Reason, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Greg Koukl, your host. I'm glad you're with me today. Thanks for joining me. I'm looking forward to talking with you about anything on your minds dealing with ethics, values, and religion. My goal to defend the classical Christian view with thoughtful reasons. That's what we call the show Stand to Reason. Be taking your calls here shortly. 855-243-9975 is the number. You just have to call during the live show, and that's Tuesday nights from 4 until 7 Los Angeles time, so you do the math. Got some folks waiting for me now. I'll get to you in just a moment. Spencer and North Carolina, Dan and Dallas, and whoever else would like to call in. Last hour, I started talking about the attrition rate of young people from the church when they reach about college age. And there's a significant attrition rate. I know many of the statistics that are bandied about need to be highly qualified, so I'm not going to give numbers, but you just know anecdotally that there's a significant challenge of young people who are raised Christian. Once they get out of the safety of their religious community. Now, maybe if you're going to high school, you're thinking, well, that's not so safe. It's a secular high school. But you're still, at church, you got your youth group, you got your parents, you've got a lot of people around you that kind of keep you honest. That is totally different when you go away. You grow up, you move out. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. You might be in a different city, especially if you're going away to school. You're accountable to yourself for your time, for your activities. You may not be connected with a group already in the new community, and you may not get connected for a while. And if you wait a while, you might not get connected at all because it's very tempting to be on your own when you're that age and when you're in that kind of environment where pretty much anything goes morally compared to what you were raised in. There's a new sense of availability, of freedom. It's funny, I have to be careful about my frame of mind just when I travel because there is something about leaving my home, getting into an airport, and then it's like I'm moving into a different world. The temptation is to think I'm anonymous and I'm disconnected from my values base. I'm going somewhere where people don't know me. Well, actually, I'm going somewhere people do, but you get my point. I'm going to a strange city and a strange airport. Who knows me? Now, as it turns out, every once in a while somebody taps me on the shoulder and says hi, and they do know me, and that happens in really odd places, like cities that I had no idea that someone would know. So there is an added incentive for me to be on my best behavior, and that's a good thing, but that doesn't apply to most of you going away to college, all right? And so there's a threat out there, and plus, given the fact that the environment that you're going into is one, would it be fair to say, is reasonably hostile to your point of view? And even if the college and university campus that you're at is, there are a lot of nice people and they emphasize tolerance. Tolerance is a one-way street. They're very nice as long as you think just like they do. They're not too tolerant of people that break with the pack. And so, and many of you are learning this, but the point I'm making is there are lots of incentives just to quit going to church and maybe to question the legitimacy of your own concerns, your own convictions, because now the socializing influence is just the opposite. Instead of being surrounded with people of like mind and like conviction, you are surrounded with people not only of different mind and different conviction, but they're oftentimes a good number of them are very evangelistic about it. And they will make you pay a price for not converting. They'll call you names. They'll marginalize you in some way. All right? So the emphasis is, so the threat is real. Now, part of this assessment that James Penner of Hemorrhaging Faith at hemorrhagingfaith.com, part of the assessment had to do with this is, by the way, Canadian So all of the statistics that he gathered pertain to Canadian teens, but gee, I don't know that there's a massive difference between Canadian teens and American teens, all right? I mean, in one sense, they're all American. There are differences in our culture. And Canada, I think, is further along towards secularization than the States are, but I think that the general trends are very similar. That's my suspicion. So I want to mention something that he discovered and that we talked about a couple of days ago, and an observation that I made that he hadn't seen, but I think is significant. He's the sociologist, not me, but he lays out this information. And what they did is they queried a significant number of young Canadians to find out what their top values were. And religion was way down on the list, if memory serves me, around 21. What was the number one value of Canadian teens, the thing that they thought most important? Some of you might be able to guess this. Friendship. Friendship was most important. Number two, that was 86%. In fact, the first four were all in the 80%, 86, 85, 84, 81, and then the fifth one was 79. So you got a huge chunk of people that weighed in with this being a significant value for them. Friendship was number one, 86% identified that. Number two, freedom. Not surprising when you think about it. Young people like to be free. They're just starting to experience it, and it's fun. I remember when I turned 17, 18, went to college, went away to the Army, came back, went to college, moved to a different city. When I moved out after high school, I was totally on my own. My parents did not support me. They didn't take care of me. I wasn't on their health plan. I wasn't on their insurance. I was in charge of my own life. That is an exhilarating feeling, by the way. Number three was trust. High value there for Canadian teens. Number four was honesty. And number five was being loved. Let me say them again. Friendship, in order. Friendship, number one. Freedom, trust, honesty, and being loved. Now, these are all important things, aren't they? And they seem noble enterprises, but I noticed something that the others at the table had not noticed when they first looked at these things. And that was, well, let me back up for a second. My 6-year-old, who's in first grade, sometimes has to do these exercises where you have a whole bunch of objects and you're supposed to find the similar ones and the dissimilar ones and draw lines. So which one of these 5 things is dissimilar to the others in some way that sets it apart? And when I see that in these 5 top values of Canadian teens. So I'm going to go through them once again, and maybe some of you notice this. But now that I've cued you, see if you get it this time. So I'm going to give them to you slowly. And I want you to ask yourself which one of these is dissimilar from the rest. Friendship, freedom, trust, honesty, and being loved. Maybe you figured it out. Friendship being the top, is trust part of friendship? Yeah. Is honesty important to friendship? Absolutely. How about being loved? Is that a characteristic? Yeah, you're right in there. So honesty, trust, being loved fit with friendship. That's 4 out of 5. Which one is left out? Freedom. Freedom. There is a sense in which friendships that are characterized by trust, honesty, and being loved also are characterized by a lack of freedom. I should say a surrendering of freedom. Is it not the case that when you enter into a relationship with another person, that in order for that to be meaningful and produce the kinds of things like trust, honesty, and being loved and feeling loved is a surrender of freedom? Do you see that the top 5 values of Canadian teens are internally at odds with each other? They're conflicted. That's what this poll shows, among other things, I'm sure, but this stands out for me. Teens are conflicted. In what way? How about this? They have a hunger for autonomy. Ergo, freedom is number 2. They have a hunger for autonomy while demanding the fruits of commitment. They have a hunger for autonomy while demanding the fruits of commitment. They want trust and honesty and being loved and friendship, but they don't want to surrender their freedom. Now, I contend that this is a picture of a fractured, confused, conflicted young person. They want something desperately, friendship, trust, honesty, being loved, but they don't know how to get it. Or they don't want to surrender what's necessary. I think what they end up getting is friendship, trust, honesty, and being loved in a shallow way if they are not willing to surrender freedom. I listened to Dennis Prager, the talk show host, a couple of weeks ago. I heard him speak somewhere, and he was talking about how he was just amazed at how young people are bored because he was never bored as a young person. And the reason he was never bored is because he had not just a variety of interests, but he was interested in significant things. His life was being spent by doing things valuable, things that had transcendent purpose. I thought about myself. I said, do you ever feel bored? And my answer was hardly ever. I certainly don't feel like my life is boring. My life is tiring. Not boring. It's tiring because there's so many things to pursue that are meaningful. It's hard to choose. And I end up spending myself for a good cause. I'm not trying to wave my flag or whatever, or draw attention to myself. I'm just saying there's a difference between living a life in a meaningful way and not. And if young people are bored, I suspect it's because they're not living their life in a meaningful way. And if they value friendship and trust and honesty and being loved, they're going to have to surrender freedom to get that. And you don't get it right away, because friendships are built on trust over time, and honesty is an expression, being loved, of investing yourself in other people, in other particular people, not just in general in people. It's individuals that you invest yourself in, and individuals are hard to be in relationship with. Remember, Charlie Brown said, I love the world. It's people I can't stand. And relationships involve individuals that you go face-to-face with, and that is a challenge, isn't it? Why do you think the New Testament is filled with exhortations regarding how we treat each other? I think the reason is because we have to be told continually to act right because it's not natural. Freedom has to be surrendered in order and sometimes for a long time. How many of you have been married for a long time are actually aware? Let me see how the best way to put this. It is not, let me back up and put it this way. It is not unusual for people to be married a long time and go through difficulty, and sometimes really heavy difficulty, but having gone through it, have the kind of relationship they always wanted, but had to pay that price for it. They now have a friendship in which there is trust and honesty and a continuous sense of being loved, but it was gained through the hardship of working through the commitment in which they sacrificed their freedom, period. And when the going gets tough for a lot of relationships, they want their freedom instead of making the investment that will give them the other things they deeply want. What's very interesting to me is that Christianity, properly understood, asks us to surrender our freedom. so that we can have the things we deeply want: friendship, trust, honesty, being loved. Now, the appeal to surrender our freedom is in virtue of the fact that we already are loved, but that love by God requires a response by us that is a costly one. And when you decide to follow Jesus, we don't always realize up front what that cost will be. But it's something that as you walk with him, you become more aware of every day. It is an adventure. Many times there are challenges, of course. I don't want to overplay that, but just thought it was interesting here. One other thing here before we go to break and then to your calls is that one of the things that made the biggest difference for young people who had durability in terms of their Christian convictions was that their parents had an authentic Christian faith. Those children, young people, whose parents had an authentic Christian faith by far fared the best. What's an authentic Christian faith? Well, there are three things that Jim Penner mentioned here: Bible, prayer, and church. That is, that the Bible was a reality in their life. It wasn't a restricting rule book, but an empowering tool book. The Bible was an influence in the parents' life. It mattered to them what God had to say about things. They tried to live obediently according to what it said, and the Bible had a role in the way they lived their lives. So when the children saw that the Bible was a factor in the way their parents lived their lives, this had a salutary impact on their own convictions. Further, there was prayer. I remember, and I told you about Guillaume, the French atheist who became a Christian, now living in New York City. And I met him in Baltimore in November. We had a wonderful conversation. I relayed his story to you. And he, within a couple days, had it published, and it was online, so it's available. He said when he first walked into a church, and he was going there to try to figure out how to disprove Christianity because he had a girl he was interested in who was a Christian, and he needed to disabuse her of her beliefs in order to get further in the relationship. One thing that struck him when he went to that church, where he felt really weird, was hoping that nobody he knew saw him there, was that these people were praying. The pastor and the people in the pews were praying as if God were really there. He told me they really believe this stuff. That struck him. Now, it shook him a little bit. I don't know if in the long term it had a salutary effect on him, but it seemed odd because he'd seen people pray in a perfunctory way, but in this church, they prayed like they meant it. If you're the kind of parents who pray like you mean it, then that's going to have a salutary effect on your children in encouraging them to continue in their convictions about Christ. And finally, church, that is, they were part of a genuine local community of vibrant believers as opposed to stagnant religious folk. There was emotional healing going on. The people in the church who were, and part of the church itself was making a difference in the world. There were opportunities for people in the church to use their talents. This is a vibrant church. It's not a perfect church. It's just a real church. It's got life in it. And so if the children were raised in an environment where a church had life in it, the people had those characteristics that I just described. That also had a salutary effect. So what do I take away from this? I think with my own girls, I want them to see the Bible matters in our lives corporately. It's not woodenly applied. It's lived. Prayer is genuine and authentic, a real expression of our hearts to a living God. And church is a community of Christians who live like consistent with the way they believe. Though that kind of home produces the most durability in young people with regards to their faith. All right. We'll probably have Jim Penner on someday, maybe. Anyway, hemorrhagingfaith.com, is that what I have here? Hemorrhagingfaith.com is his website. All right, let's take a break. More to come here with your calls on Stand to Reason.
You can find STR on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and Pinterest. Interact with STR staff, post comments, get involved with other like-minded Christians. Want to know what is going on with STR? Speaking events, new podcasts, resources, and articles? Follow STR online. You can find all of our social media connections at str.org.
All right, let's go to, I want to say Camp Lehooney, or is it Lehoon or something, in North Carolina. Spencer, what's the right way to say that word?
Camp Lejeune.
Oh, Lejeune. I wasn't even close.
Okay.
They misspelled it then. It has an L at the front of it. Is that what you have?
Yes, it's an L.
Oh, I guess they didn't misspell it then. That's a weird spelling. Is that a foreign word or something?
Actually, Camp Lejeune is a Marine base. It's the name of a Marine general.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes perfect sense now. For some reason, I don't know why that I didn't first think of military. I thought of like summer camp, and I don't know why it's not even summer. Like kids go to Camp Lejeune, in North Carolina, and then they can, send that boy to camp kind of thing. But all right, my apologies. It means you must be a Marine.
I am.
Well, Semper Fi, sir.
Semper Fi.
And thank you so much for your service and your sacrifice on our behalf.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
I have said before, if I were to join the military again, I was Army in the 60s, 1968 to 1974, but as a USAR reservist. But if I were to join again, I think I'd want to join the Marines because I like.
Yes, I remember reading that in Tactics.
Yeah, good. All right. So how can I help you, Spence?
All right. My question came up because I don't know if you're aware, but recently there was a nationally televised debate between Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis and Bill Nye the Science Guy.
That's right.
About the question, is creation a viable model?
Right.
And unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch the whole debate, but from what I did see and a lot of the reviews I read afterwards, what the debate effectively became about was, is young Earth creationism a viable model?
Yes.
Now,
because that's Ken Ham's view.
Yeah, and that is Ken Ham's view. Mm-hmm. Now, personally, I'm an old Earth creationist, but after watching that debate, reading the reviews and like some Christians I've talked about afterwards, I feel like, at least in the church at large, or at least the churches I've been involved in and the Christians I've talked to, there seems to be this dichotomy that, for the most part, the issue of creation is dependent on a young Earth interpretation of Christianity. Mm-hmm. And
wait, when you say the issue of creation, that means if you're going to be a faithful believer in creation, you have to be a young Earther. Is that what you mean?
At least as far as most of the Christians I've talked to, that seems to be the majority view.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, this hasn't been something I've liked to discuss a lot because, as far as I'm concerned, it's more important that God did create, not when He created.
Right.
But I guess I've felt kind of a fairly hostile reaction to me expressing my view in old Earth creationism, and I feel like a lot of Christians have that kind of seem to see it that way, and I feel like it's something the church needs to address more.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how you think that should be done, or like how.
Well, this is one of those issues, Spencer, that is the hot potato issue in Christian circles, partly because. At least one side of the debate, I think this is a fair description. It's not a judgment, just a description. One side of the debate has made their view an article of faith. That is, the young Earthers think that if you don't hold to the young Earth view, you are somehow compromising the faith proper. You are undermining the foundation of Christianity. And I think that is Ken Ham's point of view. So consequently, if they really think that, it is going to be very difficult for them to countenance people who disagree. Because to countenance someone who's disagreeing is to consider heresy in their view. This is a problem. I was talking with somebody else about LDS, Mormonism, and how difficult it is to get out of Mormonism because they have, I'm not equating young earth with Mormonism per se. I am equating this particular sentiment, though, that when you equate breaking ranks theologically with heresy, especially when it's not heresy, to hold the age of the earth has never been an article of faith for Christianity. Never, ever, ever, ever. So when you make that an article of faith, it makes it psychologically very difficult for anybody to even consider an alternative that might be legitimate given the evidence and given the text. Now, my understanding of this debate is that on the merits of the issue, Ken Ham did not fare well.
And I don't think he did. And most of the reviews I read, it seems people on both sides of the issue don't think he did. But.
Yeah. Now, in his defense, I guess, I didn't see the debate. I was actually speaking in Canada the night the debate took place. So I wasn't able to see it, and I didn't have a moment, really, that I could realistically go ahead and look at it on the YouTube, and I'd gotten some feedback from some of my staff and others who had seen it, and so I knew him. I think I had a fair take on, enough to say what I just said, and that Bill Nye, held sway probably over the audience in general, though the gospel did get preached clearly. So then this raises a question is, what do you consider a victory? That one preached the gospel clearly, or one made the case so that the gospel would become more believable to those who heard it? If you preach the gospel clearly, but in a context in which it clearly is incredible to believe, have you done the moment justice? My view is to try to, as much as possible, remove the obstacles to make the Christian message most credible. And the way to do that is to show that the materialistic view of reality, which Darwinism is attached to, is not a reasonable view, and Darwinism itself is compromised. I think that just on strategic grounds, the choice of the topic of the debate was a bad one, because Nye had nothing to lose. And Ken Ham had very little to gain. He had to defend that creationism is a scientific view, as I understand it.
Well, he largely tried to focus on what he called the difference between observational science and historical science.
That's a legitimate. That's a legitimate point.
Mm-hmm. But as far as presenting evidence for creationism, I didn't think he did that very well. He spent a lot of time naming known scientists who adhere to a Christian worldview, trying to make the distinction. But he did, which in the point I would disagree with, he did present that. Well, I guess he didn't say it in so many words. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he indicated more or less that if you're a real Christian, you hold to the young earth view, and to accept creationism is to accept young earth creationism.
To accept God as a creator is to accept creationism. The word creationism is a term of art now in the discussion that refers to young earth creation as opposed to some form of ID. I believe in creation. I'm not a creationist because creationist means young earth.
Okay.
What's really unfortunate about the way this discussion went, and just for the record, at our staff meeting last Tuesday, in anticipation of the debate, which would happen in a day or two, we prayed for Ken Ham as a brother in Christ, just for the record. And I was the one who actually did the praying in that case. I took that particular issue up. And I wanted him to acquit himself well in that environment and that God would be glorified and that he'd make a difference. So I was on Ken's side rooting for him in the Lord on this particular debate. But the week before last, I was in Toronto, and I spoke twice at the University of Toronto and entertained an unbelieving audience and had Q&A after my talk. I didn't address the issue of evolution in my talk. The issue of science came up a little bit, but in a different way. So the Q&A, though, did come back to the evolution issue a number of times, and one of the persons who challenged me said, "Well, of course, the Bible teaches." And now he's a evolutionist, he's a biologist, I took him to be an atheist of some sort, based on what he had to say. Well, of course, the Bible teaches that the universe is the Earth is 6,000 years old, which we know, of course, is wrong. I mean, that's his tack. And I said, "Wait a minute, the Bible doesn't teach that the Earth is 6,000 years old." He said, "It doesn't?" I said, "No, it doesn't." I mean, he was stunned. He was speechless. He said, "Well, you think it's 6,000 years old." I said, "No, I don't think so either." Speechless again. The point I'm making here is because of the way this issue has been communicated, the non-believing skeptics take it as an article of historic Christian faith that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and that date didn't or so, and that date didn't even come into play until Usher in his what Bible was that? In the Bible
the
notes,
Wycliffe Bible, I think it was like the 1400s.
yeah,
or something.
Bishop Usher in his date. So it was a study Bible, and he added up the days, and he got a date for the creation, and so that's his assessment, and that presumes that all of the genealogies are complete, and a bunch of other assumptions. But I just simply said the Bible never addresses the age of the Earth. It's not a function of the story of the account. It's not part of the narrative because that point is not relevant to the point the Bible's making. But he was stunned. Now, I know that the attitude of many young earthers is to say, look, if we do not promote a young earth, which they think is implicit in the words of the Old Testament, that's the only way to read Genesis 1 and following, then we are undermining the authority of the Bible.
And that's exactly what when I recently had a conversation with someone about this, that's exactly the point they tried to bring up.
Yeah, but what ends up happening is exactly the opposite. And this is what people on that side have to consider. That when we tell them that the Bible teaches something it does not teach, now one may reason from Scripture to this young earth, and that's fair. I think it's a noble position, and I think it can be argued for. But when we teach that this is what it says, when it doesn't say that, and that there is no death of any kind before the fall, which it does not teach, that is one way of understanding Romans 5, but it's not the only way of understanding Romans 5 and some other verses. When we teach that, then the skeptic out there who has good reason to believe the universe is ancient, that person will not take seriously the Bible in anything it says. And indeed, this was the point that the atheist was bringing up. The Bible's wrong on Adam and Eve. Therefore, Christianity has been falsified. That was his argument. So in this particular case, since he felt that it was necessary to believe in a young earth in order to be a Christian, because that's what the Bible taught, then he dismissed the truth of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
That teaching had exactly the opposite effect in that person than what your friends say we're concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens all the time. So many, even those who are theistic evolutionists, which I do not accept, I don't think that's sound, though I'm an old earther, I'm not a theistic evolutionist, but they have argued that we have discredited the Bible because we're not willing to accept what science says about evolution, and therefore we're losing our ability to witness and win people to Christ. So the very same argument is being used on both sides for their view. And I'd say that it's empirically equivalent. That is, I can see it on both sides. So what this ceases to be then is a relevant distinction between the 2 points. Since that could be argued on both sides, it ought to be abandoned by both sides as a reason to advance one's view. What I would rather have seen is maybe the title of that debate to be something different, so they take on a different issue. rather than is creation a real scientific view, or however they worded that, and had something that would put some burden of proof on the opponent, Nye, and give an opportunity not for championing a theological point of view, but offering a scientifically credible point of view with evidence in favor of it. And one thing I've heard in these, and I think I've heard scientific evidence offered for a young Earth. Why couldn't that have been the substance? And then it's science versus science instead of science versus faith. I think this is the way it's been characterized. And one thing that I've heard that troubles me about the young Earth approach, and you can tell me whether it came up or not, but a lot of young Earthers will argue this way: you weren't there to see it, I wasn't there to see it, so we can't know what happened. God was there to see it, so we need to listen to what he says. Does that sound familiar?
That sounds more or less like his 5-minute opening statement.
Okay.
So.
Well, notice how the argument trades on empiricism. Knowledge is based on empiricism. If we don't see it, we can't know it.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we're in the dark, and we have to hear from somebody else who saw it. But that's an epistemology, that is a way of knowing things that has a place for a Christian, but it's not central. It's not the whole thing, for anybody for that matter. Mm-hmm. Empiricism is a piece of the knowledge program, but it's not the only piece. There's a lot of other pieces. And if you want to argue like an empiricist, you're going to lose in this debate, period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what ends up happening. These kinds of arguments are, ironically, essentially empiricistic in their approach. And so, you didn't see it, I didn't see it, God saw it, so we go with the guy who saw it. Why is seeing necessarily believing in this case, or knowing? Aren't there other ways of knowing besides just seeing? I think so, and that's the way I'd want to argue.
All right.
Anyway, Spencer, I hope that what I've offered helps a little bit, and soldier on in this one, because be nice to your friends who disagree. I'll recommend a book for you that you may want to get on this issue, and it's simply titled, and I think appropriately titled, "The 7 Days That Split the World." Is that it? John Lennox, "The 7 Days That Divide the World." I think it is. John Lennox, Lennox. He's a Oxford.
I'm familiar with him. He did the debate with Richard Dawkins.
Yes, he did, and he did God's Undertaker. Yeah, "The 7 Days That Divide the World." I think he has a very fair take on it. He is an old earther, but it's an appeal, for peace in this discussion, because there's a lot at stake. And one question that I would ask the person who says, "I'm just reading the book. The book says day. I take it as day. Okay, that's what it says. I'm just going the plain reading of the text." Okay, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
That same Bible says that the sun rises and the sun sets. Does it? Is the sun moving, or is the earth moving relative to the sun?
Well, the earth's moving.
Well, for goodness sake, I'm just reading the text. There's the plain words. Hundreds of times this text says the sun rises, the sun sets. It courses through the heavens. I mean, okay, so if I were just going on that kind of naive reading of the text, then I'd have to be a geocentrist, which nobody that I know that is a young earth is a geocentrist. So why not? Why aren't they if they're just reading the words? Well, they got some additional information from, pardon me to say it, science regarding this issue, and that has helped properly inform their hermeneutic on this. But anyway, there's a whole chapter on that in John Lennox's book, and it's about whether the earth moves or not, because that was Galileo's issue. All right, Spencer, I thank you for your call. I got to run, and once again, Semper Fi. Break time, then more on Stand to Reason. Stay with us.
Each of us as Christian ambassadors faces two daunting challenges when trying to make a difference for Christ. First, how do we initiate conversations about spiritual things in a way that doesn't seem awkward? Second, how do we keep ourselves from getting trapped or overwhelmed by others more aggressive than we are? Well, that's what Greg Koukl can teach you in his book and DVD curriculum on tactics. Greg will teach you how to maneuver in conversations so you can create more productive dialogue with skeptics and challengers. Tactics are practical skills that Greg gives names like Columbo, suicide, steamroller, Rhodes Scholar, and more. Tactics are a way of engaging others effectively and winsomely, no matter what the subject. If you're tired of finding yourself flat-footed and intimidated in conversations about what you believe, if you want to increase your confidence and your skill in discussions, no matter who you're talking to, then Tactics is for you. Order Tactics in book, DVD, CD, or MP3 format at STR's online store at str.org. Or simply give us a call at 800-2-REASON. That's Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions.
All right, friends, Greg Koukl here, Stand to Reason, giving you a piece of my mind, as I do every, Tuesday night is the live show, 4 until 7. Many are listening around the country in some of our markets and only get an hour, maybe 2 hours. You're not listening live. If you want to call me, you have to call during the live show. And if you're missing anything, and if you're not getting 3 hours, you're missing good stuff. Just go to iTunes, look up Stand to Reason, subscribe. Go to str.org and subscribe. And it's free, and it's only 3 hours a week. So it's the best thing that you can do, I think, for your life as a thinking Christian. And maybe that's a little self-congratulatory, but I frankly don't know of any other forum quite like this where there is this kind of engagement with Christians and non-Christians where you can, get your issues addressed in the way we address them. Okay. And I tell people who I teach in tactics and train, do some talking and speaking, I said, you want to get the vision, listen to the show, and that's how you catch this kind of thing. So my recommendation is you catch it by listening regularly, and the best way to do that is podcast. All right, let's go to Dallas and Dan. Dan in Dallas, hey.
How you doing, Greg?
Okay.
Thank you for taking my phone call.
Sure.
Tactics was good, but the only regret that I had with it was that you wanted to be a Marine and not an airman. So other than that, it was great.
Okay. Well, my apologies there. I don't know. It's not like one branch of the service against other. I have respect for everybody, and everything. My son actually joined the Air Force. Then he had some physical difficulty with his hip. He had to back down of that. But they're just, to me, and this is purely aesthetic, there's a certain type of, I don't know, je ne sais quoi. I don't know what. It's just a thing.
Image.
There's something about, being a Marine, and I do like the Semper Fi, and whatever. It's the few, the proud, the Marine. So maybe it's advertising, I don't know, that got me. I've also read some great stories about Marines, but then also about Army Special Forces as well. So, okay. I love them all, and thank you for your service.
No problem. Thank you so much. All right, so on to my question. It's kind of in a similar vein as your last caller, but it was in regards to the Genesis 1:28 passage.
The Genesis 1:28? Is that
right.
What you said? Okay, let me take a look at it. Go ahead.
And it talks about God telling Adam to have dominion over the earth.
Yeah.
And I was wondering from a Christian perspective, nowadays, how does that apply to our lives nowadays? Like, what is our responsibility towards the earth? How are we supposed to live in a way that respects the earth? And there's so many different viewpoints on it, and how much energy you use, and how much water you use, and are you riding a bicycle to work, or stuff like that. It seems to, in my view, kind of go overboard. But what is our a balanced living, and to care for the earth when we look at that command that God gave to Adam.
Yeah, there's a lot here. God blessed them, said to him, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over every living thing that moves on the earth. Behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed, the surface of the earth, every tree which has fruit yielding seed shall be food for you, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and every living thing that moves on the earth, which is life, I've given every green plant for food, and it was so. And so, that seems to be Psalm 8. has more to say about this, about dominion. And I think that man was supposed to rule over. Now, there is this massive environmental movement. And I would say that I think 98% of it is illicit.
Right.
It's governed by the wrong ideas. It is driven by the wrong facts. Is there a place for appropriate stewardship? The answer is, of course, there's a place for appropriate stewardship, as long as we keep things in their proper perspective. And one piece of the puzzle has to be that the earth was made for man. And what drives a lot of the environmental movement is an implicit, I think sometimes explicit, conviction that human beings are a cancer on the planet.
Right.
Now, what's curious about that is this is a value judgment against one type of organism on the planet. And what I give this judgment coming from a naturalistic point of view, what is curious to me is they do not consistently include man as part of nature. So when man builds a freeway system to be able to travel easily, this is unnatural. But when bees build honeycomb, that's an engineered structure. That's not unnatural. So what is their distinction between natural and unnatural?
Right.
So there's an odd thing going on that people who are naturalists can't play by their rules. They can't live in a materialistic view of reality and live consistently with whatever ethic seems to fit that. For one, there are no rights in that view because there is no morality in that view. There's no way to ground it, objective morality. Secondly, therefore there are no obligations for us to treat the earth in a certain way. Secondly, life is unique on planet Earth. As far as we know, the rest of the universe is dead. The universe doesn't care about that kind of thing because the universe is not alive. And so if we destroyed every green plant and every living thing on the planet, we'd be like the rest of the universe. So if like the averages are what's right, we'd be like everything else. Now, I'm not promoting that. I'm just simply saying, in a materialistic worldview, where is the place for all of this righteous indignation about caring for planet Earth? I don't think the planet gives a hoot if you trash it. I think
it seems rather subjective on what they pick and choose as what's valuable.
Well, it's worse
and how to live.
It's worse than subjective. It's contradictory. That is, they're importing moral notions into their judgments that have no grounding in their worldview. So, but I think that principally, one of the huge parts for a Christian with regards to the environment is the second great commandment. It is, I don't trash, not because I think Mother Earth cares about trash, but my neighbors care about trash. If I throw junk down, it looks bad to them. So as an act of loving my neighbor, I don't trash. I want to keep things looking beautiful to our eyes. And so it's an act of consideration to them. And the same thing, if we, for most of man's time on Earth, the population numbers and the technology were not great enough to make a significant impact on the nature of planet Earth. Now it's more so. And so I think we do need to be careful, although I'm convinced that the chicken little cries of the environmental movement are ungrounded. Global warming and environment change, all of that stuff I think is largely ungrounded. As if we could do anything about it anyway, which everybody seems to pretty much acknowledge we can't. Even in the biggest naysayers or doom and gloom crowd, they still all the things, the protocols that we're supposed to pursue, nobody seems to think that they're going to make that much difference anyway.
Yeah. So the living arrangements of the average Christian, as far as how they live their lives, would you say that's kind of based on their conscience and kind of things that kind of guide them, like whether they decide to eat meat or not eat meat?
Yeah.
Is it based on those types of...
I think that largely it's an individual issue. Partly it's very difficult for us to get good information about the negative impact that our lifestyles are having on the environment that we share with other people. That's the way I'm going to put it. I'm not going to say on planet Earth because I don't want to ground it that way.
Right.
I'm going to say on the impact that we have on other people. Right. You know, so I don't really know that what all the impact. And there's a lot of things that are. Look at my wife and I recycle. All right. And our family, our household recycles. We have 2 trash bins. We actually have 3 different trash bins. We have green stuff. We have recycled stuff, and we have garbage. All right, and and we also compost. So that's like 4, right? So instead of the truck coming by and picking up 1 bin, we have 3 trucks now going through our neighborhood. 3 times the noise pollution, 3 times the gas. I don't know. I mean, it just, are we actually saving? We used to separate things out, you know, like paper and glass and all that other stuff, but they don't separate. They throw it all in the same bin and they crush it all up together. So who separates all of that stuff? Sometimes I wonder if anybody's separating it.
Right.
Maybe they got a system for doing that. Probably do. But anyway, so there are hidden environmental impact things. So what they tell you is we want you to recycle all your stuff, right? So your containers, what's the first thing they tell you to do with your containers before you throw them out?
Empty them.
Empty them.
Clean them out with water.
And rinse them out. Rinse out the plastic and this and that and the other thing, right? Well, then you're wasting water. Why should we wash garbage? I don't want to wash garbage, okay? I got a real high water bill, and we live in Southern California. Why are we washing this stuff? Don't they have... Anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is we have habits that we know are socially emphasized as being environmentally sound. I am not convinced that they are all environmentally sound, but they make us feel better.
Right.
And so I've been socialized with the rest of them to recycle stuff, and so we recycle. Does that mean that we have a smaller carbon footprint because we recycle? I'm not convinced of that. So I think there's a lot of nonsense coming out of the green movement. But I'm not against electric cars and all of that. I just don't want it all forced on people when there's lots of oil and natural gas that political powers are not letting us get at. I mean, so I think your original question then, does it come down to personal conscience? Is the answer is yes. We should do the common sense things that we can do and not waste water where everybody's digging around for water. But we should also not waste water because we're trying to protect some snail darter tadpole thing.
Yeah.
Human beings are more important. So maybe we shouldn't care about whether some things go extinct. I never could figure this out, by the way. I do not understand why the present balance of nature is so critical to naturalist types. Things have been going extinct for a long time. That's nature's way. It's the way of adapting to changing environments. Things that are not properly adapted die. Everything has its day in the sun, and then it's gone, you know? So why are we saying we can't allow anything to die if there are a certain organism that is asserting itself more aggressively on the planet? That is, human beings. What is the rationale? There may be an aesthetic value to having some dodo birds around, but I don't know why it's, other than that, morally more important or morally defensible to keep species from going extinct.
Well, it seems like it would be consistent with naturalism, that the most powerful thing lives, or the strongest survives. So,
yeah,
it seems like it would be fully consistent with that.
I don't see that as a Christian how I have an obligation to keep a species from going extinct. I don't see that argument. Right. So I'm not saying we should just kill with the wanton, abandon, and slaughter and all this other stuff. I'm just, I do not think we should just simply accept the green movement's point of view wholesale without looking carefully at the details and the facts, which I think are sometimes distorted for political reasons, or at least are unreliable, and when the whole enterprise is rooted in a worldview that is hostile to Christianity.
Right.
That makes the enterprise suspect to me. So I've always been an outdoors person. I hunted when I was a young man and was a boy. I fish now. I'm a catch and release guy because I want to have a sustainable fishery. And I love the beautiful outdoors, but I'm not going to accept wholesale the left's understanding of what the right thing to do is. Thank you, Dan, for your call. Thank you for spending time with me on the show today. I enjoyed it immensely. Look forward to next time. In the meantime, give them heaven. I'm Greg Koukl for Stand to Reason. Bye-bye, friends.